There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 5216, as amended.
Third reading. Discussion. The member from Moller, Representative Moller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. And so I wanted to first just thank Chair Moller and being able to be, this is my second term on the Committee of Public Safety, and I continue to learn just so much. And this is one of those areas of government that is life or death. I mean, we just affect so many people's lives with this committee, and as a public safety being a core function of government, it's just such a impactful committee to be on. So I really appreciate being on the committee, and thank you really a lot for that. I appreciate being able to, especially as I'm learning more about so many different facets of public safety. You know, the Public Safety Committee doesn't just deal with the police. There's so many more other parts of it. And one of the most exciting parts for me was being able to take this summer to tour the DOC facilities and listening to the needs of the DOC, not only for their facilities, but also for the security officers there, was incredibly impactful to be able to listen to their stories. When I went back to my district to talk about their incredible need, many people I found had a lot of misconceptions of what that meant. Many people look at the idea of giving money to DOC facilities, especially where we house our IPs, that you know, these people have committed crimes and that we shouldn't be giving them any more money because, you know, how dare we give whatever to people who have committed crimes. And you know, you cannot, no one can accuse me of ever being soft on criminals. At the same time, people who have committed crimes at some point in time, unless they're there for life, will be leaving the prisons and the facilities, and they need to be people by the time that they leave those facilities. And I want them to be whole people, reformed people. And so it was just really impactful to be able to hear the stories about what these people, what our security officers are doing, the type of programming that is being funded to not only for IPs to learn skills, but to have so much more therapy and other things that are happening so that we can start that reconciliation process. And I remember talking in 23 about how important it was for us to have that in the right order, that I have been talking so often with people in my district and with other people that I have met around the state, that justice is not just going and serving time for your crime. That's not justice. Reconciliation is justice. Being able to have that reformation, to do that. But in order to do that, in order to actually come to that point, we have to have accountability and repentance. And so those things have to come in that order. And it's been really, really good to be able to see what's happening at DOC. We got to have that chance to see the restitution circle, which was incredibly interesting and impactful as well. And so I really appreciated being able to have that. I also really appreciate being able to support the funding that we're putting for the crime victim services. I have heard incredible stories about the crime victim services in my district. And I mean, we have a tiny little office that may be staffed by 4 people right now, and the leader of the boss, the chief officer, I guess, of that place was talking about how one person was out on maternity leave, and so they were struggling to keep up with the need. And we are seeing that, members. We are seeing that after COVID, after shutdowns, after government overreach, of just isolation completely. You know, we are seeing the effects of that. We are seeing what is happening from lack of services, lack of human contact, a complete isolation, seeing people who have struggled with drugs and alcohol, seeing those women who were in horrific situations. The Crime Victim Services, I mean, as we have said in committee, if we could have given them more money, we would have. We know the work that they're doing not only is life-saving, but giving this money to the Crime Victim Services allows our individual communities to meet the needs as they're seeing them there. And that's so important, and I really appreciate that. Of course, I can't say, I can't talk about this bill without talking about Mr. Otis, our therapy dog who came to visit us, and I really, really appreciated the bipartisan support of funding, at least putting the $100,000 to just starting to look at how we can look at innovative ways to support our first responders and our police officers as they are just dealing with a tremendous amount of pressure, a tremendous amount of mental stress, that they go and respond to things that we could never even imagine. I mentioned during committee that when we think about the type of calls that our first responders respond to and the amount of stress that is, we as humans maybe see one or two traumatic events, and our officers are responding to that every day, multiple times a day. They see over 100, maybe in a year. I mean, it's weighing. I've told the story before on the House floor of me going through the simulation of what it's like to respond to situations and how traumatic that was for me. And it was a simulation. It was a simulation. And so any way that we can think outside the box to provide relief to our first responders is something that I think is a worthy cause, and so I really appreciate doing that. I would like to say that I am a little concerned about the traffic compliance study. I did a ride-along recently, February it must have been, and I talked to my officer that I was riding along with and just said, hey, what do you think about this idea of and I know this is not in the bill, I understand, before people jump all over me, but just, hey, I kind of see the writing on the wall. Hey, how do you feel about this idea of not being able to ask the question of, hey, what do you know why I stopped you? Or possibly moving towards the idea of not being able to stop someone for expired tabs. And, the police officer that I was with was really concerned about this move. And it wasn't that they wanted to be punitive. It wasn't that they wanted to be the tax collector. It was none of those things. It was, we live in a community that a way for them to just stop and say, hey, dude, your headlight's out or your tabs are expired. Like, we're not pulling you over, we're not citing you, we're just telling you for a punitive way, we're just trying to create that relationship of here is a way that I can just tell you and talk to you about what's happening. And again, the officer that I did a ride along with, he never talked about this idea that I'm trying to get someone and try to create a hostile situation. It was honestly relationship building. At the same time, I watched, and you learn things when you watch people who are boots on the ground. You learn things that afterwards you think, no duh, why did I not know this? But I'm not a police officer, I'm a teacher, and their everyday life is different than my everyday life as a teacher. And as I watched the police officer that I did a ride along with, every single stop, they're running those plates. Every single stop. And obviously that makes sense. I just didn't realize that. And so they are gathering information that not only could potentially get a potential criminal off the street, but they're also gathering information to protect themselves. I mean, they walk up to a car completely unknown to them. They know why they stopped them, but unknown to what else might happen. They don't know what they will encounter as they are stopping this car. And again, I know this is not in the bill, but I looked at how the task force was worded, and it seems as if, especially as I compare it to Representative Pinto's task force about illicit drugs and about the task force on domestic violence, both of those task forces were worded very different in we're gathering information, we're analyzing trends, we're looking at barriers, we're looking at offering suggestions. This task force specifically said how to do this without police. And I know we have police on the task force, and I know we have all those, but it seems as if this task force already has a foregone conclusion. And that's concerning to me. It's concerning that, if we want to looking at pretextual stops and we're looking at, stops for expired tabs, let's look at that. But it says in the language that the conclusion that you already want. You're already looking for the conclusion of we want every other option except for this, and so I'm concerned about that. I think that's misguided, and so, gosh, this is such. I know this bill, especially in the policy bill, Representative Moller did such a good job of making sure that we had bipartisan technical things, that the money that we're spending here is going to core functions and important functions. I really would have liked to see that specific task force re-envisioned or reimagined or just revisited. And so thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, members. I really enjoyed being on the Public Safety Committee, and I look forward to seeing how this bill will change after conference. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Dakota, Representative Whitty.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members. Thank you, Chair Moller, for the opportunity to serve on the Public Safety Committee. Lee Novotny for the opportunity to serve with you. And all committee members, because I think we all bring different perspectives, and we had very respectful conversations. And at times, you probably hear too much about my experience as a 27-year law enforcement officer, but you also pick up things. And we went on some field trips that broaden our, our scope a little bit. But the debates that we have, the conversations we have away are very important. One of the biggest things that probably came out of it, and it was just more of the public safety and not this bill, was how we reached across the aisle bipartisan solution for our school resource officers. And I do appreciate that and that relationship, which I think was very helpful in getting our school resource officers back in all of our individual schools. One of the things for me, and I'll say thank you to those on both sides who attended the funeral of the Burnsville officers to show our support that day. I do talk about 365 and finding ways that we can support them. And obviously, I was disappointed that my bill to untie the hands of law enforcement didn't get a hearing or action on the floor, because I do think it will have an impact in each of our communities. And Burnsville is the one now, but Minnetonka, it crosses both ways here. We've had other, it isn't a Republican or Democrat, it's gonna happen in our communities, and we really gotta trust our law enforcement sheriffs, police chiefs, that they will be able to use the money properly to keep our communities safe and utilize it how they can. I would ask you to, if you ever have the opportunity, go to Care 11. We need more armor, and listen to the audio from that. And that is kind of where I brought this idea for. This wasn't political for me. I wish it never got politicized, but it was really personal, because a lot of those voices you will be hearing were former partners of mine. One of the things I would like to have seen is, and we only had a small target of 10 million, but more for our officers in terms of recruitment and retention. We are down more officers now than we were last year. And that starts with us, with our rhetoric, but also it shows, we also have to show that we value them and give them the equipment, but show that support. I opened up my MPPOA magazine, and there was over 2 pages of retirements lately. And we're going to need our law enforcement out there, and hopefully we can continue to show that support. So thank you for the opportunity to serve on the community and a committee, and I appreciate everything. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Itasca, Representative Johnson. I-Santee, Representative Johnson. Boy, I'm really off tonight.
Madam Speaker, members. First of all, I want to thank Chair Becker-Finn for the Judiciary Committee. We didn't always see eye to eye, but we were able to work things out. And your portion of the bill is very respectable. I'm thankful that you took care of the crime victim services. It's a very important area. Those workers working with our victims of crime do a fantastic job. I'm also glad that you took care of the forensic examiners' rate increase. Unfortunately, they were skipped last year, and they are a very important part of our judiciary system, doing the exams for mental health issues in our court systems. So thank you for taking care of that. Public safety bill, except for basically one provision, is good. I'm glad they did the telecommunication, because those telecommunication officers is the lifeline between the officer on the street and everybody else and the victims of crime. They're getting the proper information so everybody can be safe. Now, unfortunately, over the past few years, we've had an attack on our law enforcement officers. That does need to change. Minneapolis is down about 50% of where they should be, and they wonder why they're not making traffic stops. Other officers are no longer making traffic stops because all a person has to do is just make a complaint with the post board, and it goes on file, but they never know who the complainant is. They don't keep track of the person complaining, so this could be the same one complaining about officers all over the state. We don't know. That information is not available. We wonder why the motor vehicle registrations aren't being paid for. That's because the stops aren't being made. We don't need a task force to find out why, because just traffic stops aren't being done. People know that, and so they're not buying their registration and their tabs. So that's an easy one to solve. Now, unfortunately, we have an issue that we need to deal with. When I first became an officer, went to the county to test for 0 openings just to get on a list. There's over 400 people applied. Nowadays, we have departments posting their position multiple times to get 2 or 3. If we don't have our law enforcement officers, there's nobody to keep us safe. I just read today that unfortunately St. Cloud State University is ending their criminal justice program. They don't have enough people in it. If they don't have enough people in their program, that means that the officers that we don't have replacements for the officers that are retiring. And we have a lot that are retiring. We're getting in the middle of the Clinton cop era when the federal government provided funds to increase the number of officers across this country. And they're about to retire. Overall, this is a good bill, except for the one provision that, again, takes away tools officers use for not only their safety, but the safety of the person in the vehicle. So unfortunately, with that, I will not be able to vote for this bill. I wish I could, because 99% of it is good. But I will never vote on anything that will make it harder for our officers to do a harder job and make it harder for them to be safe. Please vote against this bill at this time.
I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. What I wanted to do, members, is just make some general comments first about the overall bill, and then I do have a couple of questions for one of our members. Representative Becker-Finn, thank you for running a good committee, and your staff have been just wonderful, nonpartisan and our partisan staff. Carrie Kennedy, thank you so much for all of your support in the committee, and I think we did some good work there. Of course, we had our share of disagreements too, but I felt like it didn't get out of hand, which was really good, and it could have, because there was some pretty high-profile subject matter there that we were taking up. Members, as much as I would love to vote for this bill, we had a $17 billion surplus last year in order to fund, and we should have been funding the priorities of this state. I was shocked this year when some of the victims' advocates folks made an appointment in my office and came in and said that they didn't get what they asked for last year. I was astounded that the Public Safety Committee didn't fund victims' advocacy groups. If that's not a priority for us, I don't know what is, with an excess of money. And the same with the courts. We're funding the courts with some additional items that they're in need of, but again, we had a $17.5 billion surplus, and we didn't fund them all that they needed to be funded. Overall, that's my main concern with this bill, is that we're spending more money. It's not a huge amount, but in comparison to what was spent last year, but we're still spending more money for priorities that didn't get funded last year. And I find that just really unacceptable. On the public safety end of things, I don't think we need a task force to study people to how to get people to comply with surrendering their firearms for domestic abuse orders. I have a bill for that. Wasn't given a hearing, House File 699, that requires the courts to hold a compliance hearing, a follow-up hearing after someone has been told by the courts that they need to surrender their firearms. I do have, those are kind of some of my summary of the bill, but I do have a question. If the Public Safety Chair Representative Moller would yield to a question.
She will yield. Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Chair Moller, on page 34.21 of the bill, I'm assuming you have it there, but I'll let you get there. There's some stricken language there, and the stricken language reads, the executive director's salary is set in accordance with section 15A.0815 subdivision 3. And members, what that is addressing is the Cannabis Expungement Board director and what their salary would be. And that language is stricken. And so, Representative Moller, I'm just wondering what that, and I did ask this in Ways and Means, what is the executive director's salary?
Representative Moller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So this was stricken from the bill because it's basically a technical correction here. This citation was repealed last year in state government, so this is just conforming language.
Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So, Representative Moller, do you know what the executive director of the Cannabis Expungement Board, what their salary is?
Are you asking for Representative Moller to yield again?
Yes, Madam Speaker.
Representative Moller.
Thank you. No.
Representative Scott.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would Representative Cleavorn yield to a question?
She will yield. Representative Scott.
Chair Cleavorn, this executive director's salary would be paid out of, I'm assuming, well, it was in this bill, but maybe would have been paid through your committee, through State Gov Finance. Do you know what the salary of, or even the salary range of the executive director of the Cannabis Expungement Board would be?
Representative Cleavorn.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And the director of the Office of Cannabis Management would be, the salary would be set by the Compensation Committee.
Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would Representative Cleavorn yield to another question?
She will yield. Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Cleavorn, I understand that they are now responsible for doing that, but my question is do you happen to know what the executive director of Cannabis Expungement Board, what their salary is?
Representative Cleavorn.
The Office of Cannabis Management's salary is set by the Compensation Board. I have no control over that, and it is not within my jurisdiction to set that salary.
Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, it may not be in your jurisdiction to set it, but it would be in your jurisdiction to pay for it. I don't see Representative Stevenson on the floor. I was going to ask him to yield to the same question. Members, we have this director that's going to be in charge of expunging people's records who had past criminal records for marijuana, and the lead on the Public Safety Committee or the chair of the Public Safety Committee and the chair of State Gov Finance don't know the answer to how much that person is being paid. And I don't know if they're trying to find it. If there's anybody on the floor that knows the answer to that question, I encourage them to rise and just let the body know. I think it's a really, really good question. If there's a salary range, I think that we should all know what that is. Members, it's important work that we do here. We spend a lot of taxpayer money. And so a position like that, we ought to know. We ought to be informed of what a commissioner like that is going to be, what they're going to be making for such a high-profile job, too, and an important job. Members, again, just to wrap up here, it's not a horrible bill, but it's not a great bill. And it should have been, all of these things that are being spent, have money spent on them in this bill should have been paid for last year. They're important things, and they should have been paid for last year. So I'm going to encourage a no vote. Thank you, members.
I recognize the member from Sherburne, Representative Novotny.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As Representative Scott just said, there are several things in this bill that there are good and that I support. And one of those things that I support is the money for the victims' advocates, the crime advocates. shocked that it came in at 10. They asked for 20. We knew that this was going to be a problem more than a year ago. We just had the gala for my local women's shelter, or Domestic Abuse Advocacy Center. And at that gala, we knew it was a problem, and this problem was coming, and it wasn't addressed. I said in the first public safety hearing on this bill that we need 40, and I would have been the first one to sign on to a bill to get 40. There was some language in the bill that I found confounding, that was pared down quite a bit. I still don't understand why it needs to have that language in there. I was told that the office, OJP, has in the past had problems or not ethically, or there's some questions about the ethics in some of the funds being distributed. And at that last public safety meeting, I asked for a report on what exactly those were. I still have not got the report. So I don't know what that issue is. I'd like to get that addressed. Representative Whitty mentioned the problem that we have with officers retiring. From the MPPOA magazine, I went and counted it, 124. 124, and we talked about this because it's just shocking. We've never seen that many, I've never seen that many in the MPPOA magazine, 124 in 1 2-month period. And if you go into the numbers, the problem is so many of those are not retirements. 6, 8, 10 years. That's people leaving because the ship has sailed and they can still see the shore and they're jumping now. So this is why we worry about the continuing poke. As I've said, the language on stops has considerably went down. Originally it was a poke in the eye, now it's more of a bump in the shoulder, but it's a bump in the shoulder we don't need. And I know it's going to be in your script talking points, so I'm just going to address this. And for everybody that's watching, please do not let the fact that I'm going to recommend a no vote be in no way saying that I don't support the victims' advocates. Those of us on this side of the aisle that spent our careers many, many, many times put our backside on the risk. We risked it all. Excuse me for trying to, I don't have the words when I'm trying to be politically correct and not get censored on the House floor. We put it on the line many times. We just saw how many cases that have come up since this started that officers have been hurt or injured or killed responding to domestic situations. Since then, I have publicly, personally, professionally, and financially supported my victims' advocates groups. So please do not infer that I don't support them when I recommend a no vote on this bill. I have one question for the Chair of Public Safety, if she would yield.
She will yield. Representative Novotny.
Representative Moller, there's some question about the language on the PSAP bill. That's apparently you're working someone. Can you give us an update where we're at on the PSAP language?
Representative Moller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I think you're referring to the 911 telecommunicators portion of the bill. Is that correct? Yep, you're nodding. So there was some stakeholder engagement that was done. It just wasn't done in time to get an amended drafted. And so it's my understanding that the stakeholders have reached an agreement and we're working to get that amendment ready for conference committee.
Representative Novotny.
Thank you, Chair Moller, about that. Moving forward, I'm looking ahead and thinking of things that we can change. If I'm lucky enough to be back here in the next year, I think we need to take a long, hard look at our correctional facilities. And we need to start having that conversation about 5 years ago. If you've been to St. Cloud or Stillwater, you would know what I mean. That is a process I can't even understand how long it will take to get through, but we need to have that conversation soon. That would be a project that I hope that the members across the aisle can help me work with. We have different agendas in updating and remodeling, and not updating. I want to bulldoze 120-year-old prisons and replace them with things that are efficient and safe and allow for actual retraining and getting these people back ready to enter the society. So I hope I can get some cooperation on that in the next session. Thank you, Chair.
I recognize the member from Stearns, Representative Damath. I recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Becker-Finn.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Couple things real quick. Actually, on the victim services funding, it's not in the spreadsheet, and we hadn't mentioned it previously. But one other thing we do in this bill is reallocate some of the funds from the MRRA, the Minnesota Rehabilitation and Act of that we did last year, Rehabilitation and Reinvestment Act of 2023. That was my bill, and initially we had the savings from that program were going to be divvied up in 4 different ways, with victim services getting 25% and the general fund getting 25%. And we are reallocating this in this bill so that 50% of that savings will be going towards victim services. So that's one thing we wanted to do to sort of long-term address that this is an issue that continues to come up year after year. Also wanted to give a shout out to the Representative Moller bill on therapy dogs for law enforcement. We talked about expanding it a little bit in conference for all kinds of first responders. Some of you were lucky enough to be here today when Ashes, our therapy service dog from the Roseville Fire Department, was here for a visit today. But for folks who don't know, we have therapy dogs that they're not actually there. It's not like an emotional support animal. They're actually like highly trained dogs that provide needed mental health support for our firefighters and our officers. And so I think that's it's a small amount, but it's a really cool program, and I'm glad that Chair Moller included that. And then finally, there was mention of priorities that didn't get funded last year. I just want to note, at least on the judiciary side of the ledger, we did have a change in leadership in the administration of our Supreme Courts with the appointment of Chief Justice Natalie Hudson. And so, their priorities, as the Chief Justice, her priorities may have differed from the past Chief Justice, and so there is more of a focus kind of on the staffing as well as in the jury space. So I will note going forward, when there is more money, hopefully that one issue we are going to have to address moving forward if we want our criminal justice system to be fair and equitable is what we currently pay and how we support people in jury service. Currently, it's only $50 a day, which obviously, if you've ever had to park in downtown Minneapolis and find something to eat, $50 doesn't get you very far. So the courts had actually asked for us to increase that to $100 a day for jury service, but we just didn't have the ability to do that ongoing in this bill. But I hope that we will pay attention to that in the future when I am no longer at the helm. With that, it's a good bill, and I think we did a really good job with what we have in this supplemental year. Please vote green.
I recognize the author of the bill, Representative Moller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Chair Becker-Finn. It's been a pleasure working together on these bills together over the years. We're going to miss you. So I just wanted to address a couple of the things that were said. It is really perplexing to me that members would vote no on this because of a provision that was referred to as a bump in the shoulder. That I think is in reference to the traffic stop language that we have in the bill that simply says a peace officer making a stop for those low-level violations must inform the vehicle's operator of a reason for the stop unless it would be unreasonable to do so under the totality of the circumstances. As Representative Frazier said, that's really basic and low-hanging fruit. And, another member across the aisle talked about the more positive contacts law enforcement has with people, the better off the whole situation is, the whole interaction is. And this is one of those things that we think really sets people up to have these positive interactions, both for the driver and for law enforcement. When you're starting the conversation with someone and you say, do you know why I pulled you over? You're automatically putting that person in the defensive. And so that's really what we're trying to do with this language. I heard a lot of reasoning from the other side about why you would not support the bill based on fears of things that actually aren't in this bill. And so that's also perplexing to me because you're talking about things that this bill doesn't even do. The working group that we spent some time talking about related to registration and tabs, that's really to make sure that we can adequately collect that revenue in the state, regardless of what happens, whether we take that out of something law enforcement can stop people for or not, which again is not in this bill. And I'll say that when we've had these conversations about that over the years, people, even the libertarian side, would say, we support that. We don't think law enforcement should pull people over for not paying their taxes. Now again, that isn't in this bill. We want to make sure that we're still collecting that revenue, regardless of whether we put something like that in a future bill. We know now that the numbers are down for people paying for those car registrations. And so whatever this working group does is going to help us collect that revenue. I've heard of some things like in other states, when you sell a car, that you actually keep your license plate instead of the plate moving with the car. That might be something that this group recommends that can help us make sure that we know that we're getting that income. So I think regardless of how you feel about whatever we do with stopping people or not for having expired tabs, I think whatever this group does is going to be really beneficial to us as a body moving forward. We did talk a lot about victim services. I talked about the needs already. Last year, we gave roughly $16 million to victim services funding. I'll remind members that the other side of the aisle did not vote for that funding last year, and it wasn't enough. There are a lot of unmet needs in the state. We funded a lot of other things last year in our bill too, like a lot of law enforcement needs. We had funding for $9.3 million for violent crime reduction with the BCA to help local jurisdictions, local law enforcement solve crimes. We had Representative Hewitt's bill for funding for training for law enforcement to recruit new law enforcement. We had Pathways to Policing funding. We had mental health supports. Again, we have that with the therapy dog bill this year. And then in the tax bill, we had the $300 million in public safety aid. So I just want to, there are a lot of unmet needs. Our committee has jurisdiction over a lot of things. Crime victim services are very important. We put $16 million in last year. The federal dollars are disappearing faster than we had predicted, and so we need to continue to fund that. And thank you, Chair Becker-Finn, for thinking of a creative way for long-term funding to help those programs that are needed. And then I'll just say, I do appreciate, Representative Novotny, your mentioning Department of Corrections, and Representative Moller, you talking about some of those tours and how beneficial they were. And I do really want to thank the committee members. We did do field trips. Collectively, individually, we saw Department of Corrections facilities, we saw jails, we talked to community groups doing violence prevention, we talked to Yellow Medicines doing great work around youth and restorative justice. Some of us toured 911 call centers and then domestic violence shelters. So it really was, we are really trying to get out and learn about all the great things that this committee has to do. And I will say, Representative Novotny, I share your desire to take a long, hard look at Department of Corrections. And I've said this in committee that I really hope over the interim we can have even a half day or a day long deep dive into a lot of those issues, not just with our facilities, but for our staff, for the people who are incarcerated there, for their loved ones. We really need to take that deeper dive. And I look forward to being able to do that work together. together. This is a great bill. There is absolutely no reason to vote against this bill, and I am still hopeful that that board can light up green. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The clerk will take the roll.
Will the clerk please call the names of the members voting remotely?
Carroll.
Carroll, aye.
Carroll, aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 71 ayes and 57 nays, the bill is passed. Was it amended? As amended and its title agreed to. Messages from the Senate.
Message from the Senate, Madam Speaker. I hereby announce the Senate refuses to concur in the House amendments to the following Senate file. Senate file number 5335, an act relating to human services. The Senate respectfully requests that a conference committee be appointed therein. The Senate has appointed as such committees Senators Hoffman, Fateh, and Abler. The message is signed Thomas S. Bodern, Secretary of the Senate. Nor moves that the House accede to the request of the Senate and that the Speaker appoint a conference committee of 3 members of the House to meet with a like committee appointed by the Senate on the disagreeing votes of the 2 houses on Senate file number 5335.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Noor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. That's my motion.
All those in favor of the Noor motion to refuse to concur in the Senate amendments, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails.
A message from the Senate, Madam Speaker. I hereby announce that the Senate exceeds the request of the House for the appointment of a conference committee on amendments adopted by the Senate to the following House file. House File 4124, an act relating to state government appropriating money for the Outdoor Heritage Fund. The Senate has appointed as such committee Senators Herr, Paugh, and Housley. Message is signed Thomas S. Bodern, Secretary of the Senate. Message from the Senate, Madam Speaker. I hereby announce the passage by the Senate of the following House file, herewith returned as amended by the Senate, in which amendments to concurrence of the House is respectfully requested. House file number 3911, an act relating to state government. The message assignment, Thomas S. Bodern, Secretary of the Senate. Hanson R. moves that the House refuse to concur in the Senate amendments to House File number 3911, that the Speaker appoint a conference committee of 5 members of the House, and that the House requests that a like committee be appointed by the Senate.
The member from Dakota, Representative Hanson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. That is my motion. We need to refuse to concur.
All those in favor of the Hanson motion to refuse to concur, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails.
A message from the Senate, Madam Speaker. I hereby announce the passage by the Senate following House file herewith returned as amended by the Senate, in which amendments to concurrence of the House is respectfully requested. House file number 5237, an act relating to education. The message is signed Thomas S. Bodern, Secretary of the Senate. Joachim moves that the House refuse to concur in the Senate amendments to House file number 5237, and that the Speaker appoint a conference committee of 5 members of the House, and that the House requests that a like committee be appointed by the Senate.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Joachim.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. That is my motion.
All those in favor of the Joachim motion to refuse to concur, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails.
Message from the Senate, Madam Speaker. I hereby announce the passage by the Senate the following House file, herewith returned as amended by the Senate, in which amendments to concurrence of the House is respectfully requested. House File Number 5242, an act relating to state government, appropriating money for supplemental budget for the Department of Transportation, Department of Public Safety, and so forth. The message is signed Thomas S. Bodden, Secretary of the Senate. Hornstein moves that the House refuse to concur in the Senate amendments to House File Number 5242, and that the Speaker appoint a conference committee of 5 members of the House, and that the House requests that a like committee be appointed by the Senate to confer on the disagreeing votes.
Member from Hennepin, Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, that is my motion to refuse to concur, and we'll go to conference.
All those in favor of the Hornstein motion to refuse to concur, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails.
Long moves that Rule 1.15, paragraph C, relating to disposition of Senate files, be suspended for the purpose of taking the message from the Senate relating to House File Number 4109.
Representative Long.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. That is my motion that will allow us to take up the Department of Human Rights policy bill as well as the bipartisan agreement on religious exemptions.
On the Long suspension, motion to suspend the rules, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails.
Message from the Senate. Madam Speaker, I hereby announce the passage by the Senate of the following House file, herewith returned as amended by the Senate, in which amendments to concurrence of the House is respectfully requested. House File Number 4109, an act relating to the Judiciary. The message is signed Thomas S. Bodden, Secretary of the Senate. Frederick moves that the House concur in the Senate amendments to House File Number 4109 and that the bill be repassed as amended by the Senate.
The member from Blue Earth, Representative Frederick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is a good bill. We talk about in this bill that discrimination can show up in more than one way. Discrimination can show up if someone has a disability. Discrimination can show up based on someone's skin color. It's also possible for that discrimination to show up in both ways at the same instance, and so this bill acknowledges that. This bill also talks about disabilities, and not all disabilities are visible. If we think about veterans returning from war, PTSD is not something that you can look at someone and say, oh, they have PTSD. If someone just had cancer and they went through treatment, they might be in remission, but you wouldn't know that, but that physical disability still exists. So it acknowledges that not all disabilities are visible. We talk about service animals in this bill. Where in the statute we're cleaning up because some of the language talked about the deaf and the blind, but people can get service animals for a lot of different reasons, so we don't need to call out just one group or another in this statute. So it's a good bill, and I ask for a green vote. Thank you.
The member from Ramsey, Representative Becker-Finn, on the motion to concur in the Senate amendments.
Yep, thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Frederick, for carrying this language. I'm going to talk about the new language regarding 363A.26, the religious exemption related to the Minnesota Human Rights Act. First, I want to thank Senator Westland in particular for her work on this language with me. I know Senator Limmer introduced the amendment, but Senator Westland and I have been working on this for a while with other stakeholders. I also want to thank leadership and all the other stakeholders for working together so we could resolve this issue. This language does a few important things. First, it clarifies existing constitutional protections under the law by pointing folks directly to the Constitution. Including clarifying that protections for secular business activities are fully defined by the constitutional protections. I will note here that the Constitution provides lots of different rights, and although we don't always have to explicitly put them into statute, I think in this case there was enough confusion and consternation that it makes sense for us to explicitly state these things in statute. When questions or concerns about religious exemptions arise, they should be evaluated consistent with and limited to the protections or privileges provided under the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. There is a fact-specific analysis that courts use to determine what an employee does to carry out religious mission as part of the ministerial exemption. We speak directly to that in this language. Finally, the current version of 363A.26 specifically and I believe unnecessarily singles out sexual orientation as the only class where the religious exemption applies. Citing only one prohibited form of discrimination was unnecessary and not actually accurate and kind of misleading, so this change makes sense. Again, I want to thank everyone who worked together for a while to get this language in front of us and encourage folks to vote green.
The member from Anoka, Representative Niska.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Frederick and Chair Becker-Finn. This is an important vote, and so first, Madam Speaker, I'd like to request a roll call.
Representative Niska requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Niska.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is a good day for religious freedom. This is a good day for the faith community of Minnesota. The proposed religious freedom language is the fruit of negotiations between legislative leaders, as Chair Becker-Finn said, and leaders of the faith community to preserve and clarify statutory defenses to claims of discrimination in the Minnesota Human Rights Act. Among the many legal changes that were made last year, these statutory protections were weakened and confusion was created. I have heard from many religious organizations and communities, Catholics, Muslim, Jews, evangelical Christians, and others, reaching out to me, expressing their support for changes restoring the religious exemption as it relates to potential claims related to gender identity. I offered a slightly different version of this language in House File 3926 and as an amendment in committee to House File 4021, which is essentially the bill that we are adopting here today. This isn't the exact language I proposed, but it achieves the goal of my original bill in retaining for religious organizations a broad statutory exemption, whether that would cover claims of sexual orientation or gender identity or even other claims, as Representative Becker-Finn mentioned, in the same way that they have enjoyed under the Minnesota Human Rights Act for 30 years until the confusion that was created last year. I am also pleased that we're hearing a different tone today than the rhetoric that was used in the Judiciary Committee hearing on February 29th. On that day, it must be noted that Democrats criticized testifiers from the faith community for asking for these kinds of restored exemptions, saying that testimony in favor of language very similar to what we have here was disgusting, disturbing, and hate. We're hearing a different tone today, and that is a very good thing for all Minnesotans. Again, this is not the language I would have proposed or that we had proposed, but I think it's a result that respects all Minnesotans while at the same time protecting the institutional autonomy and rights of association for peoples of faith. I think it's important to note that the language does not it only states that it's consistent with the Constitution. It is not limited to the constitutional protections that are afforded by the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution and the Minnesota Constitution. That limited to language was specifically negotiated out. It is not in the statute that we're passing here today. So this language here today is a win for all Minnesotans of good faith, all Minnesotans who care about religious freedom, and in particular for the Minnesota faith community. And I appreciate Chair Becker-Finn and Representative Frederick for their willingness to bring this forward, and I urge all members to vote green. Thank you.
So we have a roll call on the motion to concur in the Senate amendments to House File 4109, and then we will proceed to third reading on the bill. Any further discussion on the motion to concur? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll on the motion. Will the clerk please call the name of the member who's voting remotely?
Carroll.
Carroll, aye.
Carroll, aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 127 ayes and 0 nays, the motion prevails, and the clerk will give the bill its third reading as amended by the Senate.
Third reading, House File Number 4109, as amended by the Senate.
Third reading as amended by the Senate. Discussion. The member from Stearns, Representative Demuth.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, members. It is a good day here to be able to take this vote and to correct what was a problem in the Minnesota Human Rights Act. We need to make sure that we safeguard the rights and the freedoms that are enshrined in our Constitution, including the right of each Minnesotan to freely exercise their religion. This is not just an issue of one faith, as you have heard. This affects all of us. Faith leaders and Minnesotans across the state and across the political spectrum have expressed a need for this exemption, and I am glad to see that it is finally coming before the body. Minnesotans across the state are watching to see if we'll uphold our commitment to their right to practice their religion, whatever it may be, and as they see fit. Adding this religious exemption back into the Human Rights Act is about upholding the fundamental right of every citizen to live according to their faith without fear of punishment or retribution. Religious freedom is not a partisan issue. It's a fundamental right that must be protected for all citizens, regardless of their beliefs. By enacting a religious exemption to the Human Rights Act, we can reaffirm our commitment to tolerance, diversity, and the principles of liberty that have made our state great. I'm grateful for the good faith negotiations and leadership that brought us to this point. I'm especially grateful for the faith community who stood up, made their voices heard, contacted their legislators, and made a change that is possible today. House Republicans, though, are not done fighting for people of faith. We believe that religion should be absolutely protected in any equal rights amendment that comes to the floor. Today, we are sending a strong message that we stand by the religious protections in our Constitution and that our laws will reflect respect for Minnesotans of every faith background. Members, please join me in voting green.
The member from Ramsey, Representative Becker-Finn.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Speaker. And just wanted to reiterate on passage that it's really important that this is consistent with the Constitution. Our constitutional rights exist whether we put them into statute or not. But again, we're clarifying that this should be interpreted consistent with the Constitution. And I look forward to all of us working together to turn that board green and get this done this year. Thank you.
The member from Blue Earth, Representative Frederick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today, someone in Minnesota is recovering from cancer. Their body is recovering from intensive treatments and surgeries, and as a result of those treatments, they no longer have cancer. It is in remission, and therefore, because it's in remission, that they are not eligible for a reasonable accommodation. But this bill that we are about to pass will change that. That they will be eligible for reasonable accommodation even though their disability is not visible, and they can keep their job while they fully recover. There's a lot of different reasons to support this bill. But before I forget, I also want to give a huge shout out to Chair Becker-Finn and the leadership she showed to make sure that we landed on language that we all can support, along with the Speaker and all other legislative leaders who were in this fight, but specifically Chair Becker-Finn. I just want to say thank you for that. So with that, I'll just say I ask for a green vote. Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion on the bill, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. Will the clerk please call the name of the member who's voting remotely?
Carroll.
Carroll, aye.
Carroll, aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 128 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is repassed as amended and its title agreed to.
Long moves that House File Number 3872 be taken from the table.
Representative Long.
Madam Speaker, that is my motion to allow us to take up the Judiciary Policy Bill.
Any discussion on the,
Right.
sorry, it's a non-debatable motion. On the Long motion to remove House File 4872 from the table, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The clerk will report the bill.
House File Number 3872, an act relating to the judiciary, the first engrossment.
The member from Ramsey, Representative Becker-Finn, to the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In my world, we call this a hat trick. This is the Judiciary Policy Bill. We just talked about finance. Now we're going to talk about policy. So this, hopefully, members, we can get a bipartisan vote on this as well. We'll quickly go through the provisions in this bill. First, we have the Judicial and Court Staff Safety and Privacy Act, a Representative Curran bill. So what this will do will help protect the private information of our judges and judicial officials, as well as their clerks and other staff. We also have some language updating gendered language in our statutes around anti-nuptial contracts. This also includes the provisions within the judicial branch finance and policy bill, so the policy provisions requested by the courts. That includes allowing out-of-state court examiners if they're part of an interstate compact. So again, trying to address that forensic examiner issue, as well as prohibiting employers from requiring employees who work requiring employees who are doing jury duty to essentially work night shifts or swing shifts if they are doing jury duty. We also have a Representative Finke bill on Board of Public Defense updating a couple of policies in that space, as well as instructing the revisor to update gender-neutral terms in other areas of statute as well. Finally, there is a Representative Stevenson provision relating to contributory fault and joint liability, but if Chair Stevenson and Representative Niska want to argue about that, I will leave it to those two. That is the bill. Pretty small but important policy provisions for us to get across the finish line this year. Hope for your support.
There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Scott moves to amend House File Number 3872, the first engrossment. The amendment is coded A6.
The member from Anoka, Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's just been a while since we've looked at this. A lot has happened in the last week. Refreshing my mind here. Members, what my amendment does, and I will be the first to say we need to protect our judges. They play such an important role, and of course, they make some decisions that don't make a lot of people very happy. And so, by all means, we need to protect our judges. But this bill the underlying bill is so expansive. It's going to sweep in over 2,000 employees. And if you think about our county recorders having to find a way to take each employee's request to make their property information not available, not public. It's just, I just feel like it's just way too broad sweeping. And members, so what my bill would do is protect just the judges. They're the ones that are in the most limelight. A lot of times people don't even know the last name or the first name of someone that works within the courts. So members, I would ask for your support. I think this is a really practical solution to this, and I would encourage members' green vote. Thank you.
Discussion on the A6 amendment. The member from Ramsey, Representative Curran.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you, Representative Scott, for your amendment. I appreciate all the conversation that we've had around this bill. I think there's been zero debate on whether or not this is a helpful direction to go in. I think we've all come to an agreement that judges should have this protection. I will say that there was a bit of discrepancy in some of the proposed amendments or thoughts between the Judiciary Committee and the Public Safety Committee, where in one committee we heard a suggestion, like your amendment offers, that we sort of scale this back and limit the pool of folks that this might apply to. But on the other hand, in public safety, we had a different conversation. And that conversation was that maybe this bill doesn't go far enough, and that maybe at some point it should cover other offices of public service, including legislators, including police officers, which would, create, of course, a much larger pool than we currently have with our judicial staff. And so, these are a couple of reasons why I'm going to request a no vote on this amendment, is because I feel like the place that we've landed here with this article and the underlying bill, I feel like we've landed in a really good spot, knowing that this is a starting point. This is a new idea. This is something that we're just implementing now. We'll see how this works for the folks that we've guaranteed these protections to. And, if it looks like we need to make some changes, that's what we're all here for, is to continue to make our laws better. I just want to note as well that this portion, it's not an automatic process. So what this bill actually does, what the article in the underlying bill actually does, is gives the option to all of the folks listed that they can submit a form to then protect their information. So you're absolutely right. It's quite a large pool of people. Like you mentioned, over 2,000. But we could be maybe in the future looking at even more if this seems to work really well. And so for those reasons, I would ask members at this time to vote against the amendment. Thank you.
Further discussion? Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Curran, thank you for carrying the bill in the first place. It is really important to protect our judiciary. I stand by what I've also said in committee, in that there's no reason that these judges can't be in the Safe at Home program. And I know there's a delay in getting their mail. I get that whole thing. But it's the most natural place for them to go. It's already a smooth ride. They've already got that program figured out. This is going to complicate things for our county recorders. To my knowledge, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, Representative Curran, but I'm not sure that they were included in the conversations. And when you think of all the ramifications, and it's not just courts and employees, it's their families as well. So that is going to multiply it even more. Folks, it's not well vetted yet enough to become law. And so maybe we should have started with some sort of a pilot program, which would have included just justices and judges. But members, I still encourage a red vote. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
On the Scott amendment, all those in favor of the Scott amendment, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say nay. No. The motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 3872.
Third reading. Any discussion to the bill? Representative Becker-Finn.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's a good bill. Please vote green.
The clerk will take the roll on the bill. Will the clerk please call the name of the member who's voting remotely?
Carroll.
Carroll, aye.
Carroll, aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 71 ayes and 56 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to.
Long moves that House Law number 5299 be taken from the table.
Representative Long.
Madam Speaker, that is my motion to allow us to return to the Higher Education Finance Bill.
All those in favor of the Long motion, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. And the clerk will report the bill.
House File number 5299, an act relating to higher education, the first engrossment.
I'm not sure if the author of the bill would like to recap how great his bill is or would like to dive right back into amendments. Representative Pelowski.
Take the dive.
There are amendments at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Franson moves that to amend House File number 5299, the first engrossment, as amended. The amendment is coded A4.
We can pause a minute to make sure everybody gets the amendment in front of them. This is a Franson A4, originally titled Schultz A4. The member from Douglas, Representative Franson, to your A4 amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you for indulging us with a little time to grab the amendment here. Members, so this amendment is super, super easy. It deals with the North Star Promise Act, which was passed into law last year. Unfortunately, there was a mistake made in that bill as it passed that allowed for those who are residing here illegally to also be eligible for the North Star Promise Act. Members, our taxpayers are working extremely hard these days. You know, the family budget is stretched to the brink. We had a record surplus of $17.5 billion. Majority of Minnesotans thought they were going to see a tax relief. They thought they were going to see a rebate check in the amount of, a couple $1,000s, where they only got $260 a piece. Taxpayers also thought they were going to see, if they were on Social Security, a total elimination of their Social Security tax. That did not happen. And also taxes were raised by over $10 billion here in this body. So members, this amendment is very simple. It just fixes the mistake that was done last year, where instead of those who are residing here illegally, we just say, hey, you must be legal and lawfully present in Minnesota for federal immigration purposes to be eligible for the North Star Promise Act. Our taxpayers will be very happy about that, and we can fix the mistake of last year. Thanks so much. Oh, and I would request a roll call as well.
Representative Franson requests a roll call. Are there 15 hands? Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call discussion. Representative Pelowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. There are residency and eligibility requirements in the North Star Promise. These are the same as we incorporated into what was called the DREAM Act in 2013. This amendment is not necessary. I encourage the members to vote no.
Further discussion. Representative Franson.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Pelowski, thank you for reminding me. I served on your committee in 2013, and that was really a fun time. Really appreciated that committee time with you. And I remember also declaring on the House floor that while you had a good bill, there was that mistake that was made during that time as well with the DREAM Act, so I had to vote no on that bill. Members, I don't believe that our tax dollars should be supporting those that are here illegally. We want to support those that are here legally, doing the right thing. So members, I would appreciate a yes vote on the A4 amendment. Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion on the amendment, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. Will the clerk please call the name of the member who's voting remotely?
Carol.
Carol, no.
Carol, no.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 59 ayes and 68 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Scott moves to amend House Law number 5299, the first engrossment. The amendment is coded A6.
The member from Anoka, Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, states around the nation, colleges and universities around the nation are getting rid of their DEI programs. And so what my amendment does is it gets rid of ours here in the state of Minnesota. Just at the University of Minnesota alone, they spend $8 million a year on DEI positions. And I just want to remind folks what that is getting us. It's getting us large protests, destruction of campus property, and administration that caves to certain groups at the expense of others, sowing discord and alienation, putting particularly our Jewish students right now at risk, causing them to fear for their safety. It's gotten us a DEI employee that is now fired. Thankfully, they did the right thing here, who went to Spain and protested against Israel. How inclusive is that? Is that equitable? Protested against Israel in front of an Israeli flag with swastikas painted on it. And she can't understand why she was fired, so she's suing the state, or she's suing the university for being fired. We've got the department, at the U of M, the Department of Gender, Women, and Sexuality Studies faculty statement on a taxpayer-funded website. And this is what they have to say. First of all, it's a 4 or 5 page document. The GWSS faculty statement on Palestine, in which they call what happened last October, the genocide and annihilation of 1,200 Jews in a village. They called that Hamas launched an incursion. An incursion. So these are just some of the things that the DEI program in the state of Minnesota has gotten the taxpayer. I would say that the DEI programs here in the state of Minnesota have been anything but diverse, equitable, and inclusive. And now, and this stuff comes, there's a new story coming out every day, right? Like we heard yesterday that the university, that they're going to drop the charges against the 9 original people that started the encampment that went against university policy. They're going to let them go. They're not going to face any charges. But now the University of Minnesota wants to raise tuition 4 to 4.5%, the largest increase in tuition since 2010. So I know the $8 million that the university spends on DEI isn't much toward that, but it would help. Members, this DEI stuff has reached its shelf life. I would request a roll call and a green vote on the A6.
Representative Scott requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Discussion to the A6 amendment. Representative Pelowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, this amends a section that is not in the bill, but the validity of the amendment depends on the fact that it should have been heard in committee and not on the House floor. I would ask the members to vote no.
Further discussion on the A6 amendment. Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll. Will the clerk please call the name of the member who's voting remotely?
Carol.
Carol, no.
Carol, no.
Members, please vote if you would like to vote. The clerk will close the roll. There being 56 ayes and 69 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Rarick moves to amend House File Number 5299, the first engrossment. The amendment is coded A11.
The member from Anoka, Representative Niska.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. The A11 is Intellectual Freedom Protection Act, and it's necessary because, as we discussed last time when this bill was up before us, the culture of free speech on campus is in trouble. And many of our campuses, especially in public colleges and universities, including in Minnesota, that campus culture is captured by a far-left ideology that divides the world into oppressors and oppressed. It's that ideology that's fueling the pro-Hamas demonstrations, including violence and harassment on our campuses and on campuses across the country. That ideology is forcing out other viewpoints, demanding agreement, often through forced loyalty statements, such as forcing people to state agreement with principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion, for example. Schools across the country are starting to backtrack from that, recognizing the threat that poses to free speech and to academic freedom. We should stand, as the state of Minnesota, on the side of free speech in the proudest tradition of our country, and we as a legislature, we as a state government of Minnesota should speak clearly that speech is not violence, even speech we disagree with, even speech we find abhorrent. It's not violence, and violence, even on behalf of a political agenda, is not speech. Members, the Intellectual Freedom Protection Act is legislation that's been put together by the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, a leading organization advocating on behalf of free speech for all, both for speaking out on behalf of, or in opposition to efforts to stifle free speech, whether they come from the right or from the left. It is good legislation. It would treat all viewpoints equally, and it would help to ensure that we have a true pro-free speech culture on our college campuses. It's good legislation, and Madam Speaker, I request a roll call.
Representative Niska requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Discussion on the A11 amendment. Representative Pelowski.
Madam Speaker, once again, this is a major, major change in policy for the higher education institutions and probably also for free speech. The validity of this amendment would require that it be heard in committee and have public testimony, and therefore I ask the members to vote no.
Further discussion? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. Amendment. Will the clerk please call the name of the member who is voting remotely?
Carroll.
Carroll, no.
Carroll, no.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 59 ayes and 68 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Engen moves to amend House Bill number 5299, the first engrossment. The amendment is coded A13.
The member from Anoka, Representative Engen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. The A13 amendment is not meant to be a partisan one. I think that we can all agree that we can have differing beliefs and opinions on geopolitical affairs, whether it's in the past or current. But we should all draw a clear distinction between difference of opinion and indifference to basic humanity. There is a difference in those two things, and we can assert that today as a body. And while I'm a free speech absolutist, there's also a distinction between asserting those beliefs and supporting, endorsing, or promoting a terrorist organization as it's federally recognized. We're seeing what's going on college campuses. It is scary when you have less than 1% of the student population at the U of M being of Jewish descent, but yet they're 2/3 of all of these bias-related incidents that are being reported on campus. It shows that we have an issue here. And we can do something about it. We're not going to subsidize and promote that hatred with Minnesota taxpayer dollars. People have a right to spew that hatred. They have a right to spew whatever nonsense they want, however ugly I believe it is, but we don't have to fund it. That's why my amendment would actually cancel the recognition of the student organizations who are promoting and supporting terrorism, and it would ensure that students who are engaging in that activity do not receive state grants or scholarship aid. I would ask for a roll call and a green vote.
Representative Engen requests a roll call. Are there 15 hands? Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Long.
Madam Speaker, I rise to a point of order.
Representative Long, please state your point of order.
Under 3.21, amendments must be germane. This amendment is not germane as it introduces a new subject of the eligibility for financial aid, which is not in the underlying bill, and it also adds an entirely new section of law.
Representative Engen, advice.
Madam Speaker, I find that this would be in order because we deal with financial aid in this bill. We deal with student grants. We would deal with scholarship funding, all of which is in this bill, and that's what this is pertaining to. So I would request that you find the point of order not well taken.
I've had the opportunity to review the amendment, the bill, and the statutes, and I do find the point of order well taken. Representative Engen.
Madam Speaker, I appeal the ruling of the Speaker.
Representative
and request
Engen
a roll call, please.
Appeals the ruling of the Speaker, requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Discussion on the appeal. Representative Engen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And while I'm sure the student organizations who are endorsing, promoting, and engaging in terrorist activities are happy to know that germaneness was called out by the majority leader, I sent out a packet, and you can take a look at it. Here we have a eulogy to a plane hijacker.
Point of order, Madam Speaker.
We also have Death to America chiseled into the public.
You need to keep your remarks to the issue of germaneness and how your amendment is germane or is not germane to the bill. Representative Engen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And, you know, we fund these higher education institutions. We fund them. There's over $50 million in requests for bonding from some of these institutions, yet we can't say that they should de-recognize student organizations who are engaging in terrorism. It seems pretty germane to me. Unless you want your dollars funding people promoting this stuff, I suggest that you vote with the GOP in ruling against the overturning the ruling of the Speaker. Thank you, you guys. Ugh.
A yes or a green vote supports the ruling of the Speaker. A no or a red vote would overturn the ruling of the Speaker. The clerk will take the roll on the appeal. Will the clerk please call the name of the member voting remotely?
Carroll.
There you go.
Carroll, aye.
Carroll, aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 69 ayes and 58 nays, it is the judgment of the House that the decision of the Speaker shall stand. There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 5299.
Third reading. No amendments were adopted. Third reading. Discussion to the bill. The member from Hennepin, Representative Robbins. The member from Wright, Representative McDonald. The member from Hennepin, Representative Robbins.
I'm sorry, Madam Speaker, I thought I was last, not first.
We're on third reading. We have got a list from the GOP that has you at the top of the list. Representative Robbins.
Well, Madam Speaker, I guess I'm ready. I have a lot to say about this bill. I said some of it when we debated it first last week. And I think the first point I want to make is that the target for our committee was $500,000. And the committee chose to put that money into a new bureaucracy at Minnesota State that will evaluate the feasibility or the likelihood of child care centers on the Minnesota State campuses. And members, 11 of our campuses already have child care centers. And this study that they want to do would create a bureaucratic position and then work with all the campuses to come up with this, but it would be limited to Head Start. All of the campuses that already have these programs, 11 of them, only 4 went with Head Start. Not every campus thought Head Start was the best choice. So why we are spending our entire target on creating a bureaucracy to do something that campuses have already figured out to do and limiting it to Head Start makes no sense. Members, we have a lot of needs in higher ed, and we could have found a much better way to spend the target, or we could have decided we'll turn the money back to the general fund because we're looking at future deficits, and clearly higher ed will need more spending for just their regular ongoing budget requests next year. So we could have put it back in for that. But this use of the target, I just find very disappointing, and growing government when clearly there won't be ongoing money with the future deficits we're facing for it. But members, I also wanted to talk a little bit about the climate that we've seen at the University of Minnesota, the agreement the regents reached to break up the encampment and stop the protesters. it's been very discouraging, members, to watch the leadership of the University of Minnesota first enable and then not really deal appropriately with the protesters. And I'm all about free speech. I'm all about the right to protest. Members, that is a sacred right in our country, and we are blessed to live in America and have that opportunity. But free speech does not mean vandalism. It does not mean trespassing. And when you cross that line, there needs to be consequences. But I'm here to speak on behalf of the Jewish students and faculty who have reached out to me over the last few days, including 2 members today who called me and texted me different things. And before I get into what they said, based on what I had prepared for last Thursday's speech, I just want to go through, for members who may not be aware, if you read side by side, which I have here on my desk, the statement the university put out to the encampment protesters and the statement, and so they had those meetings and they made all these promises. And then subsequently, they did meet with a Jewish student leaders group and also put out a statement for them. And it's stunning, the difference between the statements. And members, I encourage you to go on the university's website and find out the differences, okay? And I was gonna go through it line by line, but I know everyone would not appreciate me taking that much time. So I just wanna say that the gist of it is the statement to the protesters who trespassed, who vandalized, and who engaged in unlawful conduct, who then got no consequences for that unlawful conduct. The statement to them was very trying to be conciliatory. And one of the things they got was, and I'm going to read it here, your coalition will be provided an opportunity to address the board and share your advocacy priorities at their meeting on May 10th. So that group who broke all the policies of the university and violated laws automatically was guaranteed a meeting at the May 10th board meeting, which is this Friday. The other group, also from the document provided to them by the same president and board, says, we will support the request of the Jewish student leaders to speak before the Board of Regents. These are students who did not violate any policies, did not break any laws, and they are going to have their request supported maybe someday to speak to the Board of Regents. The group that caused the violation of policy and broke laws was guaranteed their meeting, and within a week. Another thing with regarding campus climate, one of them was told that they would get access to a bunch of information, and then they said, please communicate to us, and we will do our best to provide more information. That was to the group that violated policies and broke rules. To the other group, they said, we will explore and seek to include future dialogue. There was no, we will absolutely provide you additional information or opportunity. But what's most concerning is that for the students who broke the rules, violated campus policy, and broke the law, they were told, the university appreciates and wants to support our Palestinian student body. We will seek to find ways to better express and evidence this support. We agree to send a follow-up email tomorrow to the university committee reporting these results. In the entire 2 pages to the Jewish student groups, There was not one statement where they said, we support the Jewish students or the Jewish community. Not once. And the feedback I have gotten, members, from the Jewish staff and students is that they do not feel supported, they do not feel safe. And as Representative Engen pointed out, he sent out these pictures, and you all have them at your desks, of the graffiti, the posters, the intimidation that they walk by every day. One person who called me, this is a call I got today, said she had gone over, she had to walk by the encampment, and she went and wrote on the sidewalk, because there was all these chalk writings, and she wrote on the sidewalk, nothing against those students, she just added to what they were writing, free the hostages. And she was surrounded, people yelling at her, and then they poured water on hostages and scrubbed it out with their feet, marching all over it. And then over where she had written hostages, they wrote Palestine. So instead of saying free the hostages, it said free Palestine. She was terrified. She does not feel supported. Another person told me about a chat they were in a meeting. Well, I don't know if I can say that. I'm not going to say that. So members, there is a huge crisis in the climate at the campus. Oh, that was one more thing I wanted to point out. The students who broke the university policies, the students who violated laws, they get a lot of meetings, they get amnesty. The document says amnesty, okay? The students who were victims of this, who did nothing wrong, they have been asking for years for the University of Minnesota's DEI groups to participate in a Hillel campus climate initiative. The university has never participated, and they still didn't guarantee they would. They just said they'd explore the possibility in the document. There is continuing unequal treatment between these two groups of students. And clearly, to Representative Scott's point, all the millions of dollars and hundreds of staff that we are dedicating to diversity, equity, and inclusion at the university is not working. And we have to face it. We have to make sure that the policies are treating all groups of students with the same level of respect and dignity, and that they're all afforded the same opportunity to have their views heard and to protest, absolutely, and to be safe on campus. So members, there's a lot we could have spent that $500,000 target on, and we are missing the mark. And when we are not standing up for all of our students and treating them equally, as these two documents clearly show we are not, we are failing our students, and we are failing the taxpayers of the state of Minnesota, who are pouring millions and millions of dollars into the university system, as we should, but then we should be having the right outcomes, and we are not. And so members, we have a lot more work to do in the Higher Education Committee. This bill really misses the mark, and I urge a no vote.
I recognize the member from Wright, Representative Rarick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
So this is a small bill and it's a skinny bill. It's less than $1 million, which is good because the last time we did a budget, it was $650 million more over base. And you know, the higher ed budget is the third largest that we do, so that's a lot. And then in the tails, another $450 million. What was so strange to me, though, is even though we gave a historic amount of money, and even to the University of Minnesota, it was $1.5 billion, so $1.5 billion to the University of Minnesota in the last biennium, this biennium, they still raised tuition. And guess what? They're going to raise tuition again. I don't know what's going on at the University of Minnesota. I really don't. Representative Robbins just talked about a few things, but this is just crazy. This is chaos. I don't know if you've watched some of the things on Twitter, but there was one of the students from the University of Minnesota just got off work. It was 11:57 p.m. a couple days ago. He was eating a slice of pizza, walking down the road, walking down the street, was attacked by a mob, started shooting at him. He was down by Dinkytown, started shooting at him. He sprinted, he ran to his car, got into his trunk, grabbed a tire iron. This is all on Tom Hauser interviewed him. Grabbed the tire iron and fought them off, but they assaulted him before they finally ran away. And you could see the video. There's shots fired all over the place. There's students scattering all over the place. This is happening all the time. I have students and parents getting hold of me all the time about the chaos and the terror and the daily occurrences down at the University of Minnesota. So even though we gave them a historic amount of money last session, $650 million, chaos has absolutely taken over. And then you talk about the encampment. So that not only violated U of M policies, but they were trespassed. So 9 people refused to leave after they were trespassed. They were arrested. And then they were giving amnesty. So the University of Minnesota said, well, we want this to go away, so just drop all the charges. And the city attorney did. All the charges were dropped. So this bill is so tiny, it's only $500,000. But apparently, the University of Minnesota needs a lot more money because they're looking at raising tuition, not 1%, not 2%, not 3%, but 4.5% more. They just got a historic amount of money. They have chaos all over the place on their campus. All you have to do is watch Twitter for one day, and you're like, oh my gosh. Are they going to have any students left because they are walking in terror every time they're walking down the streets? But now the University of Minnesota is going to raise tuition by another 4.5%. You know, and I was reading a news article, and it was interesting because it says they have 27,000 employees, and I'm sure that's a round number, 27,000 employees. And the total system has 68,000 students. So I did the math. And I thought, you know what? How many students does it take to support one of their employees? It takes 2.5 students. So for every 2.5 students, there is an employee. So I wonder where that money went. I wonder why they aren't able to keep their campus safe. I wonder why they can't deal with the protesters and the anti-Semitism that is absolutely rampant. Rampant. You should look at some of the things. I mean, Representative Engen, thank you for passing this out, and it's on your desks. Let's look at just one of these. So they chiseled these protesters, if that's what you want to call them. They chiseled into the side of a marble pillar in front of one of the beautiful buildings that we pay for as taxpayers, Death to America. But here's the thing, it not only said Death to America. You want to know how they spelled America? So if you take your little pen and you mark in where they chiseled out, it's America with 3 Ks. America with 3 Ks. KKK. And then Representative Robbins talked about the sidewalk chalk. Well, that was lovely. Let's just talk about the sidewalk chalk down at the University of Minnesota. So this was on the the JCRC, so Jewish Community Relations Council website. So you can look at it and you can see this picture. But honestly, this image has been sent to me multiple times now. I have a constituent who's a student there, and he sent me an entire Google Drive full of pictures of horrible things that they have to walk by every single day at the University of Minnesota. But this particular one says, "Victory to El Aqsa flood." And I probably said that wrong. But what it means is, the words don't, what I just read doesn't matter, but what it means is, it is code name for the October 7th massacre in Israel. And underneath those words that allude to the October 7th massacre, there's an inverted red triangle symbol. The inverted red triangle symbol, which means what? Well, it symbolizes violent Palestinian resistance. Well, let's just see what some of their posters said, okay? So one of the posters that they put up, not only did they chisel "Death to America" with 3 Ks in the side of a building, and I can't even read some of these words on the House floor. I'll edit it for you. It said, "Zionists F off. Solidarity means attack. Free Palestine." Our Jewish students, our Jewish faculty and staff have to walk by this and be harassed by this and be intimidated by this. There's a lot of work to do here. I can't believe that that was tolerated. And then, not only tolerated, amnesty. These protesters demanded amnesty so that nobody got in trouble. Nobody had any consequences for any of that. So this bill has $500,000, and what does it do? That's it. That's the only amount, and that's fine because we certainly gave them a historic amount of money. But what does it do? Well, it doesn't deal with any of this stuff. It doesn't clean up any of the graffiti. It doesn't direct the university to do anything in particular. But what it does do is set up another bureaucrat. So it's $500,000 for Minn State to hire a new bureaucrat and a team so they can go out and figure out how to start daycares. We got bigger problems in the state of Minnesota. Guess what? Minn State's already done it. They already have 11 campuses with daycares already. They know how to do it. They can do it. They don't need extra support to do that. There certainly are a lot of other needs, and we just alluded to a whole bunch of them. Members, I'm going to be a no on this because we certainly could do better. I would have used that $500,000 in a lot of different ways, but to spend money on another bureaucrat at central office for Minn State to figure out how to create daycare centers when the Minn State system has done it just fine, that's a big waste of money, waste of taxpayer dollars, and we have not dealt with the chaos and craziness and anti-Semitism that is absolutely rampant on the University of Minnesota campus. I'm going to be a no. I encourage a no vote on this bill.
I recognize the author of the bill, Representative Pelowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. To expedite the business of the House, and more importantly, to expedite the business of the people, I encourage everyone to vote for the higher education, very, very small budget bill.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. Members, please vote. The clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Carroll.
Carroll, aye.
Carroll, aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 69 ayes and 58 noes, the motion prevails and the bill is adopted as amended. Messages from the Senate.
Message from the Senate. Madam Speaker, I hereby announce the passage by the Senate of the following House file. Herewith returned as amended by the Senate, in which amendments the concurrence of the House is respectfully requested. House File Number 5040, an act relating to retirement. The message is signed Thomas S. Bodden, Secretary of the Senate. Her moves that the House concur in the Senate amendments to House File Number 5040 and that the bill be repassed as amended by the Senate.
I recognize the author, Representative Hurd, who will explain the Senate amendments.
Madam Speaker, that is my motion. The Senate removed a cross-reference that MMB found confusing. The language is acceptable to the pension plan boards, and so I ask for support of this.
Discussion. Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. From time to time, the pension bill does have a few amendments that go on, some technical corrections, and we work very closely with our Senate counterparts to make sure that the bills line up so we don't have a conference committee. My recommendation to members is that we go ahead with the concurrence and vote yes, and bring this to the governor's desk for the 2024 pension bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of the motion to concur with the Senate amendment say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion prevails. The clerk will give this bill its third reading as amended by the Senate.
Third reading, House File Number 5040, as amended by the Senate.
Further discussion. Representative Hurd.
It's a good bill. Representative O'Driscoll said it all. Let's pass it and vote green.
Further discussion? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the members who are voting remotely.
Carroll.
Carroll, aye.
Carroll, aye.
The clerk will close the roll. Representative Robbins. Perryman, Representative Perryman. Representative Gilman. Oh, this, okay.
We missed voting.
Okay, I'll restate the members who have not voted yet. So I'll start with Representative Robbins. Robbins votes aye. Representative Gilman. Gilman votes aye. Representative Perryman. Perryman votes aye. Representative Murphy. Murphy votes aye. Any other members who wish to vote? The clerk will close the roll. There being 125 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is repassed as amended by the Senate and its title agreed to. Messages from the Senate.
A message from the Senate. Madam Speaker, I hereby announce the passage by the Senate of the following House file, herewith returned as amended by the Senate, in which amendments to concurrence of the House is respectfully requested. House File Number 3204, an act relating to domestic relations. The message is signed Thomas S. Bodden, Secretary of the Senate. Moller moved that the House concur in the Senate amendments to House Bill number 3204 and that the bill be repassed as amended by the Senate.
I recognize the author, Representative Moller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, this is a family law package containing a number of bills that we voted off the floor here. First, it has the same parenting time language that we passed unanimously with an effective date change, a clarifying an effective date clause. Next, it contains Representative Scott's spousal maintenance bill that we also passed unanimously. There were some technical changes recommended by the reviser to that bill. It does have language of a bill, House File 5422, which deals with prenuptial and postnuptial agreements. That was a late bill in the House, but the companion went through the full Senate process. It came because of some case law, and the Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers suggested it. It's been vetted, and nobody has raised any concerns about it. And finally, the bill contains a scaled-back version of Representative Holland's assisted reproduction bill. The language in the bill addresses in vitro fertilization and other assisted reproduction issues, but it very specifically does not deal with surrogacy. Language was adopted in the Senate to respond to some of the concerns that were raised, and that is what is in the bill. I would appreciate your support. Thank you.
Discussion. I recognize Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Moller. I encourage a green vote on this bill.
There being no further discussion, all those in favor of the motion to concur, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say nay. The motion prevails. The clerk will give its bill its third reading as amended by the Senate.
Third reading, House File number 3204, as amended by the Senate.
Third reading as amended by the Senate. Discussion. Representative Moller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Brian Lake from the State Bar Association. There were a lot of stakeholders who worked on these bills. He has put in so much time and energy into these bills and this bill as a whole, and just wanted to say thank you. Looking forward to a green vote.
Further discussion. Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll. Members, please vote. The clerk will call the name of the members who are voting remotely.
Carroll.
Carroll, aye.
Carroll, aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 127 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is repassed as amended by the Senate and its title agreed to. Conference committee reports on House files.
Conference can report on House File number 3436, an act relating to transportation. The message is addressed to the Honorable Melissa Hortman, Speaker of the House, the Honorable Bobby Joe Champion, President of the Senate. We, the undersigned conferees for House File number 3436, report that we have agreed upon the items in dispute and recommend as follows. The conference committee report is signed by 2 of the 3 members on the part of the House and 2 out of the 3 members on the part of the Senate. Tabke moves that the report of the Conference Committee on House File number 3436 be adopted and that the bill be repassed as amended by the Conference Committee.
I recognize the author, Representative Tabke.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. So this is the Conference Committee report for the Transportation Policy Bill, and we passed this off of the House floor, and there were no changes, not many changes from where we were at on the House position going into the Policy Conference Committee. We added some things from the Senate into the bill. It includes now Representative Keel's beat hauling. It has a supplemental warning systems for school buses, new allowances for motorcycle ground effect lights, emergency weight limit waivers for septic tanks, which is a Lucero thing that we've been working on for a couple years before this, and then new report from DVS on driver's licenses exams. So we'll have a lot more information coming from DVS on driver's licenses, and CDL hours of services exemption for transporting fuel in emergency conditions. And so it was really great working with the conference committee, and I just appreciate everyone's support.
Discussion. I recognize Representative Petersburg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I do appreciate the work that was done on this conference committee. That was really one of the better conference committees. Things were worked out very much bipartisanly. A lot of stuff was in here. And I appreciate the work that was done even before it went to conference committee in regards to the bill itself. It's really a good one. You know, I wish I could say there will ever be a bill here that comes across this floor there isn't something that may not be exactly what the people want, but boy, you'd have to look at it a long time in order to find something in this particular bill. So I appreciate that. I appreciate the work of everybody on the conference committee. I appreciate the author of the amendment of the bill as well, Representative Tabke, and I appreciate a green vote.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion to adopt the conference committee report say aye. Those opposed say no. The motion prevails, and the clerk will give its bill its third reading as amended by conference.
Third reading, House File Number 3436, as amended by
Third reading as amended by conference. Discussion. Representative Tabke.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Just want to say thanks really quick to my LA, Jared Margolis. They were really great in helping get everything through. Tenzin Sayung is our great CLA who was working on the bill. Matt Bauman is our CA and did an absolutely wonderful job. Our researcher is top of the line. Kyle Schwab, it was really great working with everybody on nonpartisan staff as well, Matt Burris and Andy Lee. And then lastly to our conferees. So thank you very much to Lead Petersburg for his kind words and for all of your work on getting to this point, and especially to Chair Hornstein for all of his mentorship and teaching me how to do things. So I just appreciate how great and kind he always is and how we got to this place. So thank you very much for your support of the Transportation Policy Bill.
Further discussion? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll. The chief clerk will call the names of the members who are voting remotely.
Carroll.
One more time.
Carroll, aye.
Carroll, aye.
The chief clerk will close the roll. There being 97 ayes and 30 noes, the bill is repassed as amended by conference and its title agreed to. Messages from the Senate.
Message from the Senate, Madam Speaker. I hereby announce the passage by the Senate of the following House file, herewith returned as amended by the Senate, in which amendments the concurrence of the House is respectfully requested. House File Number 4247, an act relating to health. The message is signed Thomas S. Bodern, Secretary of the Senate. Liebling moves that the House refuse to concur in the Senate amendments to House File Number 4247, that the Speaker appoint a conference committee of 3 members of the House, and that the House requests that a like committee be appointed by the Senate.
I recognize the author, Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. That is my motion. This is the licensing and scope of practice bill. There are some differences to be worked out.
All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The motion prevails, and the motion to refuse to and the motion prevails. Messages from the Senate.
Message from the Senate, Madam Speaker. I hereby announce The passage by the Senate of the following House file, herewith returned as amended by the Senate, in which amendments to concurrence of the House was respectfully requested. House File Number 5247, an act relating to taxation. The message is signed Thomas S. Bodden, Secretary of the Senate. Gomez moves that the House refuse to concur in the Senate amendments to House File Number 5247, that the Speaker appoint a conference committee of 5 members of the House, and the House requests that a like committee be appointed by the Senate.
I recognize the author, Representative Gomez.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. That's my motion.
All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The motion prevails.
That's it, right, Cassie?
I recognize Majority Leader Long.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move a recess to call the Speaker for 10 minutes to allow for some processing that will need to be done before we can bring back some conferees to the body.
Representative Long moves to a motion to call of the recess. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those say no. Those opposed say no. No. The House is in recess. Announcements by the Speaker.
Announcement by the Speaker. The Speaker announces the appointment of the following members of the House to a conference committee on Senate File Number 5289, an act relating to economic development. Hassan, Zhang, and Zalesnikar. Announcement by the Speaker. The Speaker announces the appointment of the following members of the House to a conference committee report on Senate File 5335, an act relating to state government. Noor, Bonner, and Franson. Announcement by the Speaker. The Speaker announces the appointment of the following members of the House to a conference committee on House File Number 3911, an act relating to state government. Hanson R., Purcell, Finke, Jordan, and Heinzman. Announcement by the Speaker. The Speaker announces the appointment of the following members of the House to a conference committee on House File Number 4247, an act relating to health. Liebling, Carroll, Nadeau. Announcement by the Speaker. The Speaker announces the appointment of the following members of the House to a conference committee on House File Number 5237, an act relating to education. Joachim, Clardy, Edelson, Sensor-Mura, and Creshaw. Announcement by the Speaker. Speaker announces the appointment of the following members of the House to a conference committee on House File Number 5242, an act relating to transportation. Hornstein, Nelson M., Howard, Tabke, and Petersburg. Announcement by the Speaker. The Speaker announces the appointment of the following members of the House to a conference committee on House File Number 5247, an act relating to taxation. Gomez, Lislagard, Egbadje, Lee Kay, and Norris.
Representative Long.
Madam Speaker, I move that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 11 a.m. Thursday, May 9th, 2024.
Representative Long moves that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 11 a.m. on Thursday, May 9th, 2024. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no.
Madam Speaker, could I make an announcement real quick?
The motion prevails. We'll move to announcements since I did not call that earlier. Representative Olson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for this indulgence. I-90 party tomorrow. You are all encouraged to be there. Please, we love this. This is the kind of the session wrap. It's the last chance, the last hurrah for us. So the I-90 party, 22 years in existence, Wednesday, May 8th, 5 to 9 p.m., CHS Field. Please be there. We'd love to have you.
Further announcements. Representative Long.
Madam Speaker, I move that the House do now adjourn.
Representative Long moves that the House do now adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The motion prevails and the House stands adjourned until 11 a.m. on Thursday, May 9, 2024.